My husband, John, 40M, and I, 26F, have been together 5 years, married for 3, and have 3 kids, ages 3 months, 2, 4. We met when I was still in college working part-time as a nanny for his friend's family. We crossed paths a few times at my nanny family's functions, and my nanny family gave him my number and encouraged me to go out with him. Initially I only did because I didn't want to offend them, but we ended up hitting it off really well. I accidentally got pregnant with my oldest about a year into seeing him. 3 kinds of birth control and still got pregnant. What are the chances? At first I was devastated because I was just about to graduate and had already been offered an amazing internship in my field. The internship would require me to move across the country, and so I was already planning to leave my current job and break up with John so I could pursue my dream job, so my initial plan was to terminate the pregnancy. However, long story short, I ended up staying with John and having my oldest, but under the agreement that I would start working ASAP and John would pay for childcare so I didn't have to be a ZAM and permanently walk away from career goals that I had worked very hard toward for basically my whole life. As soon as my son was born, I fell instantly in love, and the few resentments I had about the way things turned out completely disappeared. While I did stay home with him for the first year because I couldn't stand to leave him for more than a few hours, I was open with John about my plans to find a job in my field as soon as I could, and he was always on board and never expressed any issue with it. John and I got married when my oldest was 1, and John started pushing me to have more kids, but I refused because I felt ready to start working. I ended up getting a really great job offer at the company I'm still with today. I started looking for nannies and was put in contact with our current nanny, Sarah, 21F. She has honestly been a godsend. She is the sole reason I made it through being apart from my baby, and she does such an amazing job. I honestly cannot imagine my life without her. Shortly after I started my job, I accidentally got pregnant again, another birth control baby, and my husband tried to talk me into staying home with the kids again after my second was born, but I was too happy with my job. They offered to let me WFH part-time, which worked out perfectly. My husband wanted to cut back Sarah's hours as I would be home a lot more, but I refused because while I'd be able to breastfeed and help take care of my newborn, I still wanted her there to help with our rambunctious toddler while I was working. Our arrangement worked out really well, and I recently did the same with our third baby, while Sarah watches the older 2 during the days when I'm working. Sarah and I get along great. We have a lot in common, and I see her as a friend as much as an employee. My kids love her very much and ask about her whenever she isn't there. Since I was also a nanny, I am able to work with her effectively, and I have so much respect and admiration for the job she does with my kids, as she's even more patient and hands-on than I ever was with my nanny family's kids. Even though we pay her a lot, I honestly think she's worth even more than that, and I tip her as much as I can. For some reason my husband does not feel the same way. He is very critical of her. Not to her face, he has very little interaction with her, as most days she leaves before he gets home. To me, he is always nitpicking how she does things, like if a few toys get left out in the playroom, if she used too much gas in the car, if she got fast food for the kids instead of cooking them a meal, etc. He tells me she is not worth what we're paying her, and that she's doing an easy job I was fine doing for free. This irritates me like nothing else, because while yes, I don't find looking after my kids particularly difficult, I wouldn't call it remotely easy, and it's much different when it comes to dedicating most of your free time to looking after someone else's kids. And Sarah goes above and beyond to make sure my kids are safe, happy and entertained every day, and even does some preschooling with them. Last week my husband confronted me with some of the footage from our security cameras of Sarah neglecting our kids. The whole thing was completely ridiculous. There was one video where she left my 2-year in her high chair crying for 5 minutes while taking my 4-year-old to the bathroom 3 feet away. There was one where she let them stay up past bedtime to finish a movie while she worked on schoolwork. All relatively innocuous things like that I couldn't care less about. The worst of it was a video of her texting on her phone for like 30 minutes while my kids were playing, which we have asked her to not be on the phone while playing with the kids. But even though she technically did something wrong, she's a human being, she's not going to be perfect 100% of the time. Once he was done showing me, I asked him, is the neglect in the room with us right now? And that made him really mad. He accused me of not caring about our children's well-being, because if I did, I would agree with him that we need to fire her. I told him we're firing her over my dead body, and if it wasn't for her, our children would actually be neglected because we both work full-time. He told me that Sarah was trying to take over my role as a mother in my children's eyes, and she was coming between me and our family, and if I cared about our family, I would want to fire her too. I laughed in his face and told him I would rather divorce him and pay for her myself than fire her and quit my job. He stormed out and hasn't spoken to me since. Comment 1. A mid-30s man pursues a college student, gets her number and is recommended by her employer. She only starts dating him to not offend her employer. She just happens to get pregnant right before breaking things off to pursue opportunities on the other side of the country. Repeatedly gets pregnant right as she re-enters the workforce to continue growing her career. Every time this relationship has progressed to the next big step has been against OP's initial wishes. I'm feeling like John has been subtly steering things from the start. Comment 2. NTA. Sounds super suspicious that you got pregnant so often on birth control, and incredibly convenient timing. Like he was trying to baby trap you into being a young, traditional wife. Birth control has a lot of things that could render it less effective, like heat. So my husband comes from a traditional family. Mum's Azam, father was sole provider. I come from the opposite. My mother pretty much forbade from ever being financially dependent on a man and drilled that into me early on. My husband worked hard to unlearn the values he saw replicated at home. He, often more than, pulled his weight at home, was an engaged and present father and a genuine partner. The one thing that grinds my gears is how much weight he puts on the opinions of his family. I get that we all want our parents to be proud of us, but this is too much. My in-laws are staying with us for 2 weeks. Our usual mo is, I prep breakfast, we all eat lunch at work/school, and my husband makes dinner. We have a cleaner, but she's on holiday, so in the meantime we're DIYing the cleaning, where it's down to everyone to keep their space clean, and common spaces we all clean. This is how we've always done it, and it works. My in-laws hate that I'm one of those modern women. They hate that I work. They hate that I don't find my purpose in being a wife and mother, and they hate that my husband pulls his weight at home. We spoke pretty frankly early on, where I established my boundaries and told them I won't be chastised about how I live my life in my home. When I am a guest in their home, I accommodate their ways and play the deal they wish I was. They have for the most part respected this. I got home yesterday after work tired and starving. I typically get home 15:30 and we eat at 1900. I said quick hellos and ran up for a pre-dinner shower. When I came down, I went to the kitchen to help set up for dinner and found nothing ready. I asked my husband about it, but he wouldn't look at me, and his mother answered that he hadn't cooked anything. She told me I needed to do my duty as a wife and cook for my family. My coward of a husband still wasn't looking at me. I just walked away and ordered takeaway. I dished up for me and my kids and we sat at the table to eat. My husband and his parents served themselves and joined us. My mother-in-law was still going on about what was wrong with me and why I was a failure. I asked my husband if he had anything to say. He said his mother had a point and it wouldn't hurt if I acted more like a proper woman and took better care of my home and children. He said tradition was tradition for a reason, and it was kind of insulting that I thought I was too good for how he was raised. This is where I might be the a-hole. I told him tradition won't allow a man on 35K to support a family of 5, and he was too broke to be so sexist. He looked hurt and I saw tears welling in his eyes. He excused himself from the table. I regret saying this in front of our children, but him saying that to me after I'm busting my ass to clean up his mess on top of having to deal with his parents was too much for me. Comment 1. I think the part where you invited his feedback is very important here. If you haven't done that, perhaps it would be a both parties situation. But you clearly and directly gave him a choice to make. Does he disrespect or defend you? He chose disrespect. I don't even think what you said is disrespectful. It is a factual statement that hurts, like saying someone has a drinking problem or something like that. Comment 2. NTA. Clearly. If he had a spine and stood up to his parents, maybe his feelings wouldn't be hurt. You need to form a united front against his parents or tell him they are not welcome in your home. And then kick them out early. So rude. Comment 3. NTA. First off, never bow before your in-laws again. Next, do not allow your in-laws into your home again without an apology and a one-time only promise to never mention this tradition nonsense. Finally, make it clear to your husband that he needs to back you up or go live with his parents. I have a daughter, 15F, and a son, 16M. My daughter has always been interested in everything my son picks up and has a habit of one-upping him. For example, when I encouraged my son to try to learn to code, he was struggling a bit with Python, an easier language, and she went ahead and obsessively learned C++, which is much more technical and hard. My daughter is very good at math and has learned stuff beyond her level, so it isn't much of a challenge for her, and I feel like she uses this to harm his self-esteem. She made a program to visualize multivariate graphs. I have a hobby, fun stuff budget I set for both kids, and she has already exhausted hers as she takes dance classes and plays soccer and has bought expensive clothes. Recently I decided to get a subscription called Hackpack for my son from a startup company by a YouTuber named Mark Robber, who is an ex-NASA engineer that makes kits of robotics components that you can play around with. You get different kits on a subscription basis. My daughter asked if she could borrow it too and play around with it. I told her she couldn't as it was for her brother. I have a feeling she would try to one-up his creations and make him feel bad. I told her that she had already allocated her hobby funds. I also don't want to risk her breaking his things. She once borrowed his old desktop computer when he got a new laptop, claiming that she wanted to test stuff that needed multiple computers, and she did something that broke it to the point where it would have artifacts on the display after 10 minutes of turning on, and the video card had to be replaced. She is quite upset at me, but I feel she needs to understand she can't just be entitled to her brother's stuff. Comment 1. It seems like you actively encourage your son to do these things like coding or buying him the robotics kit, but not your daughter, who is clearly interested in STEM and excels at it to the point of being considered for prodigy-level courses. Also, the way this is written seems like these aren't feelings your son is expressing as much as feelings you have about your daughter excelling in math/STEM and participating in extracurricular activities while your son just hasn't found his thing yet. Comment 2. Your daughter is interested and skilled in science and math, but you got the robotics subscription for your son. You ordered it for him. It didn't come out of his fun budget. What extra thing, outside of her spending money, did you get for your daughter? YTA for not finding a way to encourage both your children. So, my husband, 34M, and I, 28F, just had a baby boy. He's amazing, precious, and very gassy at times. I had a C-section, not by choice, and am still recovering. Baby boy is about 2 weeks old. My husband is great. He shares all the responsibilities with me, supports me postpartum, and really makes sure baby boy and I are happy and healthy. The thing is, my husband hasn't worked for a while now and I'm the sole provider at the moment. His dad passed away about 2 months ago, but he had to leave me when I was 9 months pregnant. His family lives in a different country for 3 weeks because none of his siblings wanted to manage everything around his dad's passing away. He stopped working when he left and hasn't gotten back to it since. We have talked about it and he will get back to work in the near future, a month or so. I worked until the day I gave birth. I own a small business and need to get back to partial work in a few days. I will have to get back to full-time in about 3 weeks. Now, my husband has a brother that isn't the best family guy. He provides very little for his family, has 5 kids he often leaves his wife alone with, only helps to babysit sometimes, and in general isn't really there unless it has to do with keeping the kids alive at max. My husband's brother won some football tickets about 6 months ago and invited my husband and his dad to go with. My husband had to pay for his submission to that contest too. Now that my father-in-law passed away, my husband's brother wants them both to go to that football game abroad and stay for 4 days. My husband doesn't just want to go, he made it a fact, and says his brother said this would be a trip in memory of their father. Ike, how I'll do 4 days with baby boy alone at home. He will be 5 weeks old and I will be freshly back to work. My mom will be able to help, but I can't just leave the kid with her at this stage. I told my husband there's no way he's leaving, and now he is mad at me and says he will be going anyway, and I'm an asshole for not understanding him. I will say, before their father died, I still did the same thing. I'll have a newborn at home and won't want him to leave. This has been known for over 6 months now. Comment 1. NTA. Disregarding, like, everything about him being not working and you overworking. Who cares about what he wants, what his brother wants, or anything like that? He has a newborn at home, he's not just gonna up and vanish like that. He chose to have a kid, now he has to take care of it. His boy time vanished for a good long while the moment he agreed to have a kid with you. He knows what it takes to care for a newborn, I hope so at least, so no way a good dad would just up and leave you alone like that. Comment 2. NTA, it's unreasonable to leave you alone with a newborn and work while he goes traveling. I get why he wants to go, but you have to work since he's not working, and it's not okay to leave you with work and a tiny baby when you've said no.